now. Welcome. So my name is Josh Haas with Hawks on the Wing. I'm really excited to be joining you and connecting with you virtually. So in these historic times of keeping social distance, we're all craving connection right now. And if you're as lucky as I am, I at least have my family with me at home, which makes it nice. And don't forget that you can still go outside. We're going outside a lot every day, and we kind of make challenges of it. So right now, given that we're lucky enough to be in spring, we're challenging ourselves to find the new bird of the day. What's new? Today for me, that was a brown thrasher driving to here tonight. So that was exciting. And the other thing that we like to do is see what's blooming in the yard. We're lucky enough to have a small piece of property in Southwest Michigan, so we have a trail that we can walk, and that's really nice. But, a lot of our friends that live in neighborhoods are still getting out and walking, just making sure to keep their social distance so you can still get out there. Even though we're kind of missing each other and missing those connections live with each other, we thought we'd take advantage of technology and do some birding virtually. So normally tonight, the second Wednesday of the month, we would be meeting our group with the Battle Creek Audubon to do our first bird walk of the season. And so we thought, given we're not allowed to do that right now for the safety of everybody, we'd connect virtually. Speaking of technology, we are at the mercy of technology, especially internet connections. So please bear with me. I'm trying to do a lot of things at once here and facilitating a lot of technology to bring this feed to you today. Now, the goal here is to get on some ducks here at Wintergreen Lake, walk you through how to identify each one of these ducks, have a little fun doing it, and I want to encourage you to make some comments. Actually go into the feed and comment to me. Make sure to ask some questions. If you're interested in something, I'll try and get to them as soon as I can. But again, I just want to welcome you to the feed, and I do want to give a special thank you to the Kellogg Bird Sanctuary, especially the staff here who have really welcomed this with open arms. They share an affinity for trying to connect people with nature, and we're going to try and do that today virtually. I had to chuckle a little bit on the way too because rain is in the area, and normally when there's an outlook for rain, that typically brings our attendance level down significantly. A lot of people like to watch the news nowadays, and for this, you're in your homes, so I don't think I'm going to have a drop in attendance because of the weather. So luckily I have some overhead protection, and we're out of the sprinkles, and we can bring the feed to you. So again, feel free to comment. We're going to do some birding here. Again, thank you to the Kellogg Bird Sanctuary, and welcome to Wintergreen Lake. Wintergreen Lake is a wonderful place to track the spring migration of waterfowl from March through about early May, and then again when they return back to their southern wintering grounds. You can experience fall migration from about the end of September through the end of November until the ice up happens in December or January. So it's a beautiful place to come. It's also very welcoming. The paths are really comfortable. They're flat. Even if you have disabilities, there is a way to get down to the lake on a paved path without having to take the stairs. So it's very, very welcoming and inviting. The Kellogg Bird Sanctuary is known in the area for their reintroduction of the Trumpeter swan, which really started back in the late 70s, early to mid 80s, with then leader Joe Johnson. So Joe was really instrumental in reintroducing the Trumpeter swans to Southwest Michigan into one of the premier native habitats for that bird. And so nowadays, it's not hard to find a Trumpeter swan anymore. They're everywhere in Southwest Michigan. You can see them year round. So we're going to focus a little bit on the swans. We'll do our normal Canada goose, maybe a little on the mallard. And then we'll focus on the lake for some divers and get into some of the differences there and have a little fun. So again, please comment. I'll try to get to them as soon as I can. and let's get into it. So let's find some trumpeters. Hopefully you're hearing the background noise. We've actually got a trumpeter trumpeting right now. Whoa. Okay. So let's get on. So here's one. Trying to get on a good one that's going to show us some things here, like how erect their necks are and the overall shape. We don't have one swimming at the moment, but we'll do this for now. Okay, so this is our trumpeter swan. The first thing to look at, obviously, is that big, long black bill. So the only other swan that's going to have a really black, dark bill like that is the tundra. And being that it is April, it's going to be hard to find a tundra. They tend to migrate through in very large groups. So the best bet right now is trumpeter. But some other things you can look for. One of the things I like to zoom in on is the where the bill comes into the head and the face there, and notice the eye, how the eye looks like it's part of that black bill. It's almost like it's just part of it or it's connected to it. A tundra is actually the black bill kind of ends, and then there's almost what looks like a little space before the eye begins. So that's something that you can look for when you have a close enough view. The other thing is, if they're together and you can compare them side by side, the tundra is actually smaller than the trumpeter. The trumpeter is much larger. All white. One thing that can kind of trick you in summer, mid to late summer, once the juveniles start swimming, for about a year or so, they're more gray, mottled gray, all over their body. They're not as bright white yet. And they actually have pinkish gray bills, not that really stark black bill. So that can kind of trick you when you're comparing that to a mute swan, because of course the mute swan, we're looking for that bright orange bill with the black knob on top. But the trumpeter's all black, very long, kind of more slender bill. When they're in the water especially, they also hold their necks straight up, very erect, and in some cases it's even tilted back a little bit. More often than not, a mute swan is going to have a very elegant S curve to their neck. So that's one thing to look for as well. Speaking of mute swans, we've got one over here I think we can get on. Speaking of elegant S, we can see that in the neck right there. Now, this bird's kind of preening and mostly at rest. But notice that orange bill, they have a little black at the base of the bill there, but that big, large black knob is what you want to look for. Okay. There's that kind of elegant curve to the neck that we're looking for. You'll notice this bird has a neck band on it. So one of the things that's somewhat unfortunate, it's not the bird's fault. It's something that one of my mentors told me that always stuck with me. But this is an invasive bird, and they're known to actually disturb or actually pull up far more vegetation than they actually consume. They actually consume, 4 to 5 pounds of vegetation a day. And with that 4 to 5 pounds that they consume, they waste a lot. Some believe that even though that's wasted and pulled up, there is that waste there. Some believe that there are other waterfowl, other swans, geese, and ducks that come in and pick at that vegetation to get invertebrates or insects out of it. So, there is some debate over that waste. But they're very aggressive, very territorial, and they push trumpeters out. So there's not a whole lot of mutes around right now. There's been some calling over the years, which is a good thing, and that's helping the trumpeters as well. Let's get off this because I think I see some dabblers over here. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, so let's see. These are nice. You probably recognize these guys. It's nice to see the pair together. This is a pair of wood ducks. So they haven't been around for that long. It's been nice to see them over the last week or so, really building in numbers. But look at that beautiful plumage on that male. I love the head, that reddish orange eye color, and that perfect view right there of the tuft and that kind of stream tuft on the back of the head. Notice the neck is kind of a rufous, rusty color, and then the side or the flanks of the bird are kind of a light tannish gray. The female, you can see now, has a little white on the eye there. It's basically a teardrop of white that surrounds the eye. So when you see a female by herself, this is one really diagnostic way to identify the female wood duck, with that white teardrop. It's nice that she's preened in because they're just kind of hanging, gives us some time to look at these birds. I'm zoomed in a little bit. Hopefully everybody can see these features really well. Beautiful night here on Wintergreen Lake. The other new bird that I noticed here last night when I was doing some testing, purple martins. So before we go to the purple martin lodge that they have here, I do want to finish up on wood duck. One interesting thing about wood ducks that people find really hard to believe is they actually nest in cavities or boxes, man-made boxes, in trees. That's how they get their name, the wood duck. And what's hard to believe is when they're young, are born, very quickly they actually come out of the nest box or the cavity, and they just jump. They free fall, they get to the ground, and it's essentially a race to get to water before a potential predator gets to them, because they're obviously, no pun intended, sitting ducks until they get to that water. But it's an interesting thing about these cavity nesters. They just jump and go for it. They're made to do it. They've evolved this way. They make it to water, so they often don't nest very far from water. And then once they're in the water, they're swimming with mom and dad and starting to learn how to feed appropriately. So let's pan over here to the bird sanctuary's purple martin houses. So this is a good example. Now they're not here today. The one on the wire that you may be able to see is actually an attract, and it's a fake purple martin to just attract the birds in. But they were checking it out yesterday. Not sure if they were returned to stay, or if they were just migrants that kind of dropped by. The purple martins are insectivore, flying insect eaters. So they're going to hunt 100% on the wing. And later in the summer, if we're allowed to come back and socialize, maybe we can set something up to really experience them in flight. They are amazing in flight, and if you're a photographer that's ever tried to photograph them, you know what I'm talking about. They're incredibly hard to photograph, but they're really fun to watch, and they're catching these insects on the wing. So this is a bird that's really in need, and something that you should really look into if you have property. It's worth checking out. No different than bluebird boxes, managing those bluebird boxes. You could manage purple martin houses as well and do some real good. Let's go over here. We've got a Canada goose here, so now I'm going to have to, he's swimming, so I'm going to try and stay on him here and talk at the same time. So interesting fact between geese and swans. So one of the reasons a goose is a goose and a swan is the number of vertebrae in their neck. And trumpeter or swans in general tend to have 24 or more vertebrae, which is really crazy. And geese have less, typically I think 15 to 23 means you have a goose. And then ducks actually have even less. So that's kind of a way that biologists taxonomically tell these birds apart. Okay, so the Canada goose, I know it's kind of like the mallard, which we'll get to soon. Canada goose, it's just a Canada goose. Well, years and years ago, in the 50s, one of the goals of the bird sanctuary was to help the declining Canada goose along, and they were actually really helping to try and build nesting islands and places for these birds to increase their numbers. You look around now, you can go to any farm field, golf course, people's yards, especially on lakes, and they can be a nuisance. There's so many now, so obviously there's no need for that kind of management, but they're an interesting bird nonetheless. So notice the very contrasting black neck with that tannish brown body. And then up by the eye, you're going to have that big hiccup of white. Now, there's actually several subspecies of Canada goose. The ones we see a lot here, especially at Wintergreen Lake, it's actually a neat place to come because you can see the common subspecies as well as the lesser. They pretty much look identical. It's just the lesser, as its name would infer, is just a little bit smaller. Oftentimes, people will see a lesser along with the common or greater, and they'll think, ooh, I've got a cackling goose. And it's oftentimes a mistake that's made when listing birds. The cackler does look very similar to the Canada goose, but he is a lot shorter, smaller, almost like a large duck size. The neck is more compact, and then the bill is very stubby. To me, you think you have one over and over, but you don't until you actually have one, and then you really know it. They look like someone punched them in the face, and that bill got smashed into their face. It's just really stubby, almost like a pie-billed grebe look to it. And that's also a very rare occurrence here, typically only in migration. Most of the time I'll get cacklers here at Wintergreen Lake. It's very rare, but usually in fall. And one of the better times to come is during the Bird Sanctuary's fall celebration in early November. That early November time frame is really good here for the cacklers. So that's our Canada, and you're probably hearing the Canada geese in the background. There's just loads of them here. Okay, so, man, what a beautiful night. Let's pan over here. Just check the feed here. So someone asked about green-winged teal. I haven't seen them. Okay, so I haven't seen green wing, but I had blue wing the last couple days here. I've had blue wing teal, so maybe we'll get lucky. We'll see them come in. Let's real quick. I'd like to pan over here because there's a male wood duck swimming. Let's take a look at this guy. So look at that rusty reddish orange front on the bird. A little demarcation mark of that white hiccup, and then he goes into that really pretty tan brown. Just a beautiful bird. They also have this really high-pitched whistle call, and when they fly, you'll often hear them making this call. Most of the time, we'll hear the call before we see them. Then we'll look up and find them in the sky. So a fun little duck to watch. All right, let's get on some divers. I hope everybody's enjoying this and the feed is smooth. Bear with me here. Let's see what we can get. Okay. Let's see here. This is a ringneck duck. Okay, he's at rest. So maybe we can find a different one. Okay, just making sure feed's good. Try and find. Yeah, here's one. That's at least a little bit. Oh man, I was hoping he was active, but he's not. So this is a pair. They're both kind of at rest or somewhat sleeping. But what I want you to notice about this bird, especially the male that we're looking at, is the difference between the back or the top of the bird and the sides. So I want you to pay attention to this because right now there's a lot of ringneck ducks mixed in with a lot of lesser scop. They're a similar sized bird. They both have kind of a tufted head that looks erect in the water. They sit higher in the water. They just look really similar, especially at a distance. But what I always like to look for is that dark front, top, and back of the ringneck duck. And the lesser scop, in comparison, is going to look white or at least a really, really light gray all the way from side to top to the other side. And so if you see something that has a dark back to it, you know it's not a lesser scop, and you can just cross him off and start looking through your guide for something else that looks similar. And oftentimes that ringneck will pop up. In fact, there's lots of scop here. I'll try and get on a scop for comparison. Maybe we can find some together. So that's a Scop in the same resting position. So you'll notice that even though it's, you know, a gray on top, it's still a lot lighter than the ring-necked that would be along with them. So I'll try and find, oh, there's a ring neck right there. So we've got a ring neck here. Notice that nice contrasty difference, demarcation between that dark back and the light colored sides. We go to that lesser Scop, you don't have that contrast difference between the gray on top and the white on the sides. So that's one of the things that I like to look for, and whether they're at rest or active, you can see this really pretty easily. Let's see. Find maybe a more active group here. They're all kind of at rest right now. This is crazy. Okay, here we go. Here's a little bit of an active group. So, that's a female Scop. Notice a little white hiccup on the front of the bill. Roughly the same size and shape, stockiness as the male, but just brown overall, pretty drab. And then that little white hiccup on both sides where the bill meets the face there. But we had a Bufflehead just a second ago. There he is. So let's talk about our Bufflehead. So I love these guys. And one of the things that you really want to take note of with Bufflehead is all the white. And I love the sun's out right now because when you look, in fact, I'm going to go to this group here. And if you just close your eyes and then open them real quick and look at this feed, the first thing you're going to notice are the two ducks in view that are almost pure white because you're at a distance. Now, if we zoom in a little bit, obviously they're not pure white. There's actually some other coloration with them, though. This is a male and a female. This is perfect. So the male, notice the first thing you're going to see other than that bright white body is that bright white cheek patch, as they call it. Make sure we're zoomed in here. And so along with that white base of the body there, where it meets the water, then they have that really bright cheek patch. Look at the female, they're more brown and drab overall. And the only white you're going to see is really in the little hiccup on their cheek. It's a little cheek patch, it's just a little white oval. A lot less than what you're seeing on this male here. Let's see if we can get her to turn. You'll see it again right there. She's kind of showing it. Yeah, right there. So just that little, much smaller wing patch. Oh, another new bird of the day. My first female RedWinged Blackbird today here at the bird sanctuary. So that was a good find. They're just a stunning bird. Okay, let's see. So back to the Bufflehead. The other thing I want to talk about with Buffleheads, they're absolutely tiny. Probably one of the smallest ducks around, at least in our area. They're absolutely tiny, compact little diving ducks. And I love their little bill. In fact, maybe we can see this guy looks somewhat active. There's song Sparrow in the background. A little hard to tell, but look how tiny that bird's bill is. Let's see if we can get him back up here. Of course, now he's resting. And another one. They're all resting right now. It's amazing. Shoot. Okay. Well, in the meantime, let's go back to a Scop, because one thing that we didn't talk about was the greater Scop. And one of the things that I always like to tell people, especially here at the Bird Sanctuary, is, so what we're on right now are two lesser Scops. Lesser Scops, especially inland on freshwater, always outnumber greater Scops. So I'm not saying that you can use that as gospel and it's diagnostic, but it's a good piece of the puzzle. And what we like to do is put a few pieces of that puzzle together, and you don't need all of them, you just need a few, and amazingly that image or that picture on the puzzle starts to come together. So with the lesser Scop, they're not really, because they're all at rest right now, they're kind of hard to see, but their heads tend to stand up a little bit more erect, and they have a tuft more on the back of the head, kind of a pointed kind of tuft and it's more at the back of the head, where the greater's more rounded, a larger head that's more rounded, and if there's a tuft at all, it's more on the front. The other thing that I like to look for on the greater is a larger, much more substantial bill that has kind of like a tooth at the end. Greaters also tend to sit lower in the water, and the lessers tend to be a little bit higher when they're riding in the water. In fact, here is a closer one. This will be helpful. Oh no, those are ringnecks. Little buggers. Tricked me. There's that black. Okay, we'll go back to our lesser Scop here. So, again, graders tend to ride lower in the water. And the last thing that I'll say is graders. Remember how I said lessers far outnumber the graders inland? They tend to like shallower, more fresh water. Now, for us, we're inland, period, even with the Great Lakes. But I find far more greater Scop on the Great Lakes or on larger bodies of water. So where I am located here on Wintergreen Lake, just behind me, not but a few hundred yards away, is Gull Lake, which is a lot deeper, larger lake. And if someone came to me looking for a greater Scop in our area, that's the first place I'd go. I wouldn't waste my time here at Wintergreen. They do have records of them. And they can be found here, so it pays to slowly go through all of what you think are lesser Scops and make sure. But certainly, you're better off going to Gull Lake for that. We got a little passerine here. Let's see if we can get on this bird. Hopefully you can, just by the shape and that, oh, there she goes. Just by the shape, hopefully you can see that was a northern cardinal. It was a female. Let's get back to the ducks here. Anything that pops up, we'll get on. All right, so I'm going to answer a comment here. So it looks like someone wants some description of gadwalls versus black ducks. Great question. Okay, so we don't have either of those on the lake at the moment that I've found. So let me just talk through that. So gadwalls are more sleek and a little smaller than a black duck. A black duck is going to, size-wise, look just like a mallard. They're just going to be darker overall than, say, the female mallard, which a pure American black duck, which is hard to find nowadays. There's a lot of hybridization going on between mallards, especially in black ducks. But a pure black duck is going to have a really dark head with just a little bit of a kind of faint line on the head. A gadwall is also going to have a smaller, more compact head and a much smaller bill. Gadwalls also have, it's kind of hard to explain. It's almost like, you know how clay has a very solid color. There's not a whole lot of like gradation in the color of clay. It's like one color. Gadwalls have that. Their little coloration differences have contrast lines between those color differences. There's little speckles mixed in, and they're kind of this brownish color that has a little bit more saturation to it. They're smaller. Their bills are a lot smaller, where the black duck is going to have a much more substantial bill, similar to what a mallard looks like. Okay. Let's see. We had a song sparrow come in. Now let's go over here to this guy. This is perfect. I'm going to do a little bit more passing action. All right, so I'm sure you recognize this guy. Oh, come on, buddy. Well, that was our RedWinged Blackbird before he left. And redwings, and back to the lake so you can see some ducks at least. Redwings are really cool birds. So one of the things that I always like to point out to people with redwings, I mean, obviously you see that red shoulder, and it's a very diagnostic field mark, especially here in the Midwest. But you have juveniles and females that are often mistaken for thrushes or large sparrows, things like that. And so one of the things you look for is the bill, very sharp, pronounced bill. They obviously call a lot. And you can hear them, especially right now, calling like crazy because the females are just starting to come back into our latitude, and the males have been back for well over a month already calling, trying to set up their territories. There's this song sparrow that's just evading me. There he goes. So anyway, blackbirds, I know the male is pretty easy and something that isn't going to trick you too much, but the females will. And when you look at those females, look for that sharp blackbird bill. And then also they're streaked, heavily streaked, and brownish with some orange and yellow on the throat, especially when the female calls. Really, really a striking bird. Here we go. Canada geese here. This is something that we always work on in our house. They're Canada goose or Canada geese, not Canadian geese. But hey, whatever gets you outside. All right. What else we got here? We're running out of ducks. We might have to just end this. You know, we haven't featured Mallard so much. This is our Mallard. Pretty drab on the back, lighter sides, kind of grayish sides, brownish on top. I love the rusty chest and neck on these birds, especially when they're in flight coming in at you. Just a wonderful bird. Very underrated. I know most people, oh, it's just a Mallard. But no different than it's just a red tail. Red-tailed hawks are a great example of a bird that you use to compare to all other bootios or open land soaring raptors. The mallard can be the same kind of duck for waterfowl because you see so many mallards. I mean, for Pete's sake, you know, in a drain pond next to Meyer, my local grocery store, I can see mallards nesting. I mean, it's ridiculous how common they are. But it pays to know who they are, how to identify them, especially if you may bump into a northern shoveler who have similar colorations. One of the things that I like to tell people is see how the rust is on the front of this bird. Oh, good questions on comments here. I'll get to those. The rust here you can see in this video is on the front of the bird. In a northern shoveler, it's further back and on the sides. So one way to kind of tell the difference other than that massive shovel-shaped bill. But my point here is getting the mallard identification really solidified in your mind, and so you can kind of put it in the back and just start working on other birds is a really good way to learn your waterfowl. Okay, let's see. Really hopeful we'd have some teal come in. It's not looking that way yet. There's a wood duck whistle call in the background, if you could hear that. Let's answer some questions here. So when will the warblers start moving through? Well, really any time now you should be able to see things like yellow-rumped warblers coming through. Pine warblers and palm warblers will be some of the earlier arrivals other than the yellow-rumped. And then really your best bet is mid to end April is really when the warblers will start coming back. And in this latitude, the first week in May, last week in April, first week in May is outstanding for warblers. So that's going to be your peak around here for warblers. Oh, thanks, Janet. So she lives on Beetle Lake, a lot of wetlands and little kind of hidden areas on that lake, and she's got a lot of ringneck and scop. And I know she's told me a lot of nesting wood ducks as well. So Beetle Lake is public. You can set a boat in there and bird there too if you want. All right. Well, I'd say this is pretty successful. Ooh, let's see if this guy will stay. Bear with me a second here. All right, nice. So this is a new bird, another little passerine. I say little. Notice the eye. And very large bill. Now it's sharp, similar to the redwing, but it's longer and a little stockier where the bill meets the face. But notice that yellow eye. The redwing is going to have a black eye. I'm also seeing iridescent blue on the neck and the head of this bird. That means it's not a rusty blackbird. Also notice the tail is quite substantial, pretty stocky bird as well. And so that makes this a common grackle here in our area. one of the things I love to tell people when grackles are flying, look at the tail. They often kind of fan it and hold it in such a way it looks like there's a club kind of hanging below. And another tip, if you see blackbirds at a distance, there it goes. If you see blackbirds at a distance, the grackles tend to have more direct flight. Red-winged blackbirds have a little bit of undulation to them. So if you see a mixed flock, which often you will, especially in early spring or late fall, oftentimes grackles have that straight, direct flight where the red wings will have some undulation in them. And so that's one way you can tell them apart. It gets really tricky about 2 weeks ago when brown-headed cowbirds really started to come back in big numbers. That made it a little tricky. And speaking of, this spring has been odd in that, the species are coming through. Oh, hold on. Let's see if we can get this. Now we're into something I like. So now we've got crows mobbing a raptor. Looks like a red tail. Awesome. Oh, this is sweet. Look at them go. Now this is, remember I said earlier bootios, so this is a perfect example, prime example of a bootio. Okay, come back. The red-tailed hawk is the bootio to compare all other bootios. That was a little treat. Let's see. He's not back, but we do have a crow. One thing that I'll talk to you about this crow, watch as he flies. Corvids, they tend to have kind of a rowing motion. Oh, now he's joined the group on the red tail behind the pines. They tend to look like they're rowing in flight, and that's one way I like to tell them apart at a distance from a raptor. Also, especially in bootios, you're going to see a lot of flat gliding happening where crows rarely glide. They're almost 100% flappers. Looks like they're not going to pop back up. Well, that was fun. So we've got some more questions here. Is there a trick to have warblers visit your yard? Ooh. Trees. Lots of them. Remember, almost all the warblers are going to eat insects. They're not going to eat your seed. There are a few that will dabble in your suet. Pine is one of them, as is the yellow-rumped warbler. There are a few that will eat your suet, so keep an eye on that. Really, your best bet is, a lot of trees, deciduous trees. When I lived in a neighborhood in Battle Creek, I had better warblers there, in and amongst just houses after houses after houses, than where I live now. I live on mostly grassland prairie with wetland. And so obviously common yellowthroat and yellow warblers, they're in our yard because we live in the wetland. And that's about it. So we don't have much warbler diversity, but we know that would be the case because we're in the habitat that we're in. So really trees is what you want to go after. Okay, I was hoping that red tail would pop back up, but no such luck. Let's see if anything else is close that we can focus on before we end. Well, I really thank you all for joining me, and I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. And I really want to encourage you to get outside. Now, right now, the Cala Bird Sanctuary is open, but keep in mind the restrooms, all of the buildings, they're all closed, and they're asking that you don't bring your own seed or corn for the ducks. Just enjoy them as they are. They have plenty of food on the lake. There's nothing to worry about. Come enjoy the place. If you see other people around, be respectful, keep your distance. Everybody stay healthy. And I think with that, let's just check the comments. Oh, excellent point. So my wife, perfect. So I mentioned trees. So I'll give you a little statistic here that I think came from Richard Lou's book. she's mentioning here native trees. So native trees are hugely important to just birds in general. And so the statistic is, a native white oak can host upwards of 500 different species of moth and butterfly. And moth and butterfly larvae especially are something that supports many breeding birds. Ooh. Hold that thought. We got a great blue heron with me. Oh no, we're gonna lose him. Look at those curved wings. Constant flapping and always bowed or curved wings. So we just saw it at the end. Sorry about that, but the curved wings, that's what you want to focus on compared to something like a sandhill crane, which is going to be pretty much straight and flapping in a much more stiffer, sharper wing beat. Okay, so back to the native trees. Sorry for that little bit of squirrel. Okay, so native trees are hugely important to birds. So that one white oak can support upwards of 500 species of moth and butterfly. Those moth and butterfly larvae are hugely important to breeding birds. There have been lots of studies about black-capped chickadees, Carolina chickadees, where they'll actually bypass and fly past non-native oaks and deciduous trees to get to the natives, to get their food, to fly all the way back and feed their young. And so native trees are huge. The warblers know which ones are the best. And so if you're going to plant trees in your house, go for diversity. Don't plant all white oaks. Have a good diverse habitat of trees. And once they grow, you'll start to see those warblers come in. So with that, I thank you. Get outside, even if it's in your neighborhood. Bring some binos with you. Look for the birds. Right now is huge. There's a lot of passerines starting to build. Migration's been slow. The numbers haven't been there, but it's happening now. We're starting to see a lot more. And so I wish you luck. Support the bird sanctuary. Hit up hawksonthewing.com. Keep making some comments. If you like what you see here, I'm hoping to partner more with the bird sanctuary to bring some more live content to you over the next month or so while we're held down. So thank you very much. Enjoy spring. Cheers.